Nearly 2 years after the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, Turkey puts suspects on trial in absentia. Will this proceeding shed more light on a gruesome execution? And can justice be served? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. On the afternoon of October the 2nd, 2018, journalist Jamal Khashoggi walked into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. He was never seen alive again. Now, 20 Saudi nationals are on trial in Turkey, accused of involvement in his murder. Turkish prosecutors charged the suspects in March. None of them are present in court. They're being tried in their absence. They're accused of killing Khashoggi and dismembering his body. His remains have never been found. The case drew international condemnation, including from the UN Special Rapporteur, who spent months investigating the killing. We'll bring our guests in a moment, but first, Charles Stratford takes a look back at the events that unfolded before and after Khashoggi's murder.
This is the last moment Jamal Khashoggi was seen alive. It's October the 2nd, 2018. The journalist who wrote for the Washington Post newspaper had gone to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to get documents he needed for his wedding. His Turkish fiancée, Hatice Cengiz, waited for him outside. Turkish prosecutors say he was murdered, his body dismembered, and the remains never found. 20 Saudis indicted for murder are to be tried in their absence in a court in Istanbul. Police say security camera video and photographs show the Saudi suspects arriving in Istanbul on the day Khashoggi was killed. Other video evidence shows them checking into a hotel, going to the consulate before returning to the airport and leaving that night. Istanbul prosecutors accuse former deputy head of Saudi General Intelligence Ahmed al-Asiri and former royal advisor Saud al-Qahtani of instigating murder with monstrous intent. The 18 other defendants include this man, Mehmet, who frequently travelled with the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. Khashoggi's murder caused widespread revulsion around the world. He'd been in self-imposed exile for around a year because he was afraid of being arrested if he returned home. He'd formerly been close to the Saudi royal family, but in recent years became a vocal critic of the Saudi Crown Prince. Some Western governments and the CIA said they believe Mohammed bin Salman ordered the killing. The kingdom denies that. Last December, a Saudi court sentenced 5 men to death and 3 to jail after a long and secretive trial. The UN's Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial, summary or arbitrary executions, Agnes Kalamar, who completed a 6-month investigation into Khashoggi's murder, said the Saudi trial made a mockery of justice. None of the guilty were officially named. Last May, Khashoggi's sons said they forgave the murderers, but rights groups said the pardon had been forced. Kalamard said it was another Saudi example of a parody of justice. Turkey accuses the Saudi government of obstructing the murder investigation. The Saudis say the Istanbul prosecutor didn't comply with requests to share information. The Saudi Crown Prince has denied ordering the murder, but admitted bearing responsibility as the kingdom's effective leader, standing in for aging King Salman. Khashoggi's fiancée, Hatice Cengiz, says she hopes the trial will at least shed light on where his body is. Charles Stratford, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's bring our panel into the show now. We have joining us from London Bill Law, editor of Arab Digest, an online magazine focused on the Middle East and North Africa. In Ankara, Ismail Numan Telci, vice president at the Center for Middle Eastern Studies. And in Istanbul, Mehmet Celik, managing editor at the daily Sabah. Welcome to you all. If I could start perhaps with Mehmet. So, Mehmet, why now? Why do you see Turkey is putting suspects on trial in absentia almost 2 years after the event?
Well, I mean, it has, the preparations have taken time. And of course, listening to and hearing the more than 55, I believe, witnesses have taken time. And Turkey wanted to, or the legal authorities wanted to make sure that all the evidence is, all the available evidence and witnesses are, the information from witnesses are gathered and the preparations are done so that the trial can be laid on a more concrete foundation rather than just doing a symbolic trial. So, of course, this is a trial in absentia, but it's still Turkey wants to make sure that despite being in an absentia trial, they want to make sure that there is concrete outcome and concrete evidences are surfacing so that ultimately this trial can be a good ground for taking this case to an international level. So yes, it has been about a year and a half, nearly 2 years now, but of course there has been proceedings prior to this and investigations. There was a there was a trial held in Riyadh, although many says, of course, it was for show, but these things take time. The fact that it was a very well-planned, premeditated murder, and simply we don't even know where the body is.
It needed time to be properly investigated. All right, let me take that to Bill Law in London. So, Bill, this trial likely to be on much stronger ground than the trial which we saw in Saudi Arabia, right?
Well, yes, I think it is. The Saudi trial in itself, as Agnes Kalimari said, was a farce. We still don't even know the names of the individuals who've been sentenced to death. Those 5 individuals, 3 others sentenced to jail. We're talking about 20 people, really, that the Turks are looking at, the Turkish court system is looking at. So you add the 5 and 3 together, you come up with 8. So that's at least 12 people missing from the charge sheet in Saudi Arabia. And I think that the trial, yes, of course, it will be on stronger ground. I don't know yet the details of how open the court case will be. Hopefully, it will be quite open. And I think that many people, including Jamal's fiancée, Hatice Cengiz, who needs to know where the remains of her fiancé is, but other people too will want to get more detail, will want to find out just how heavily involved the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was in this killing. We will hopefully get more information on that front. I think it will prove a big embarrassment to the Saudis as to why it's happening now. I think that there are geopolitical reasons as well for the Turks to take the decision to really open this trial, and which will be, as I said, hugely embarrassing.
So, Bill, you don't think this was just a matter of the timing, at least, not being just a matter of getting the evidence together?
Well, no, I think that the Turks have moved very, very cautiously and judiciously on assembling the evidence. But after all, the Saudis and the Turks are engaged in more than really a spat. The Saudis are annoyed, very annoyed with Turkey's support for Qatar in the GCC feud. The Turks have pretty well pushed Saudi Arabia out of any influence in Syria. I think that the Saudis and the Emiratis look askance at Turkey's support for the GNA in Libya against Haftar, the warlord that they support. I think the timing, yes, of course, it took them time to assemble the evidence. They want it to be rock solid, if you will. But I do think the timing is also linked to this broader geopolitical tug of war that's going on in the region, and which Turkey is very much involved in now.
All right, let's, if we can, bring Ismail into the discussion. Ismail, if we had a Saudi trial that ended with convictions, I think it's fair to say we can expect there's going to be a few convictions here in this trial. Where does that go, though, when you're convicting perhaps people in absentia? Where does any ruling go after that? Is there any way to implement it or escalate it?
Yeah, before before answering this question, I wanted to comment on Bill's arguments. Yes, it is correct about the timing, but this issue should be considered. It is a legal proceeding. So, I mean, of course, for legal proceedings, there are many details need to be bring together. Turkey needed to allow this proceeding to continue because there is a violation of sovereignty of Turkey. So this event took place in Turkey, in Istanbul, and of course, Turkish judicial bodies need to take some action about this. So that's why we need to underline that this process had to be done, and it is a legal proceeding.
Okay, you made that point. Where will it go? Where does the legal process go, though, after this? Will it just be a court ruling that remains unimplemented?
No, of course. I mean, we have 18 people being tried for extrajudicial killing and 2 for instigating. So if there is a ruling for that, probably there will be an international arrest warrant as a result of this. But obviously, as Bill also argued that some part of this process is related with the regional developments. I mean, there is an obviously competition between Turkey and the Emirati and Saudi axis. So there is also relation with this aspect. But of course, these people.
What does that mean, Ismail? Are you saying that the future course that this trial takes might be impacted by the future political dynamics between these countries?
Actually, I don't necessarily argue that, because I mean this court proceeding will continue under the umbrella of the court. But of course, of course, the regional competition will also continue during this time, and there might be some effect from this regional competition as well.
Where does, let me go back to Bill, where does an international arrest warrant go? Can this case then turn into some kind of international criminal investigation under UN auspices?
Well, it could do. I think really what it does do, it limits, if indeed convictions are secured, it limits the ability of these people really to travel to a lot of places that they would like to go to, not just the United States. And I think it really impinges on Mohammed bin Salman's ability to travel. He's staying now very close to home, yet this is a person who liked to parade himself in Western countries. Memorably, he came to London, and there was a huge display on taxi cabs and on posters of this young prince. It looked really rather tacky to most people's eyes, but it's an example of how keenly he likes this kind of cult of personality. This will, I think, inhibit him. I think those around him, Sadat Qahtani and al-Asiri, who are very much implicated in this criminal act. I think they're not going to be going anywhere anytime soon, certainly to countries that could, in fact, arrest them.
Well, you mentioned the Crown Prince. Let me bring Mehmet into this. What is the likelihood that this trial is going to implicate the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia in a much more direct legal way than we've seen so far, either whether it's from the UN Special Rapporteur investigation or the CIA report?
Well, I think ultimately, if this case is not carried or brought to an international legal platform, it is very unlikely that those who are directly responsible for this incident to be brought to account. So this symbolic.
So what does that mean? You think we'll end up with a sort of result that looks at the culpability or liability of the sort of second line in command rather than the very highest level?
I believe so, because unless there is a international consensus and international unity with regards to how we are dealing with a brutal murder of a journalist, a Saudi journalist, unless there is a consensus that MBS was being directly linked to this, I think it's very difficult to actually hold MBS, hold him responsible and bring him to account and make him pay for this crime. Because, of course, this is a legal matter, but we also know the Trump-MBS relationship. We also know the Western leaders and MBS relationship. Of course, they paid some lip service and condemnation remarks came. But whether or not they will let go of the military or defense agreements, whether or not they will be able to let go geostrategic positioning of Saudi Arabia for their interests, whether or not they will be able to let go some of the energy.
And Mehmet, there are very few analysts who seem to think that that is likely to be the case, that countries are going to, overlook their bilateral interests, business interests, in favor of pursuing the principle of justice, right? Let me maybe take that point to Ismail and say, ultimately, if this trial is to bring some pressure on international actors, particularly those powers in the Security Council, for this to go into a sort of international UN investigation or international trial, criminal trial, what does this trial have to do, this Turkish trial have to do? Does it need to bring new evidence to public knowledge? Does it need to build pressure and public opinion?
Yeah, there is a possibility in this regard, because as we know that not all the evidence so far have been available for the general public. So when this investigation became much deeper, there might be some possibility that new evidences could be bring to the public's attention. And of course, from the very beginning, Turkey's
so what, are you expecting that maybe we'll see the recordings released or something perhaps even more sensitive than that?
I mean, this is, of course, I can't know from now on, because there is, even if I know, there is a judicial process. But let me tell you that Turkey's priority in the very beginning was the fact that international institutions should be involved in this issue, and if there needs to be an international court proceeding, it must be done, because this was openly a murder case, and Turkey wanted those who are responsible for this to be judged and punished if it is necessary. And of course, there is another dynamic in this regard. Maybe I can tell that, as we know that in Turkey there are big number of dissent from many countries, especially from the Middle Eastern countries. And such a murder, such an incident would have the risk to instigate further events like this. So Turkey wanted to really give the message that it can't tolerate any other incident like this, because Turkey is a safe haven for those who are being oppressed by their own regimes. So Turkey welcomed many of the figures from different countries, and they can stay here as long as they are okay with the Turkish law and dynamics here. So
that's a really important point you made. That's a really important and interesting point. I want to take it back to Mehmet and say briefly, so in the calculation of the authorities in Turkey, are they looking for a result? Is the reason that they've really pushed hard on this case to at least, is their goal to make a stand for respect of Turkish sovereignty, and that these sort of actions shouldn't continue? Is that really the end game, rather than really hoping that there will ultimately be justice for Jamal Khashoggi by pursuing this?
This case is very multidimensional. I mean, several things we need to list here. First of all, at the very bottom level, Turkey's approach to this incident is humanitarian. They want to know where the body is, and they want to know, they want to make sure those who are responsible for this murder to be brought to justice. Secondly, they want to make sure that a case like this cannot happen in Turkey, and it should not give a message to those others who are willing to or thinking of or planning to give a message to their own descent living in Turkey that Turkey is not a safe country. And ultimately, Turkey wants to make sure that a criminal act happening within its border to be brought to justice within national courts, and after that brought to a platform in the international arena. Of course, having said these, it doesn't mean we should also highlight, and it's not a secret, that there is rivalry between Turkey and Saudi Arabia geopolitically. And there is rivalry, particularly between the Turkish government and MBS himself. Of course, MBS wanted to propagate himself with an image of reformist, but I think this whole issue has put a big dent on that image. Now, Turkey has been saying from the beginning that, yes, this is an incident that perhaps was directed by some high figures in Riyadh, but this is not a matter of bilateral issue. So Turkey wants to make sure that it gives several messages. First of all, something that happens within its border, it will not just be pushed under the carpet, because Turkey is not a regime like what the regime in Riyadh to do, like Kalamard says, a parody of justice.
Right.
And they want to make sure this is transparent proceedings. And in fact, in today's trial, Hatice Cengiz was present, UN rapporteur was present, some journalists were present. So there is, of course, the geopolitical part of the Turkey-Saudi Arabia relationship.
Okay.
But I think the government in Ankara wants to exclude that from this trial.
Bill, how much international appetite is there right now to turn this into something bigger?
Well, that's interesting. I think, with everything that's going on with COVID-19, with the Black Lives Matter, I think people are looking, for reassurance that there remains a moral high ground. And I think one of the things that has disturbed many people, including myself, because Jamal was a colleague of mine, is the extent to which Donald Trump has been almost a co-conspirator in this effort to push this all under the carpet. Now, Trump, as we're discovering, is vulnerable. We may look forward to a Trump-free America in a few months' time. There is a lot of anger in the Senate and Congress towards Saudi Arabia. It's particularly to do with oil and the effort really to drive the American oil industry into the ground, if I can put it that way. So the oil sector is really angry with the Saudis. They're angry with MBS. And of course, there are also many senators, powerful senators, supporters of Trump, who are not happy with the Yemen war. So MBS is vulnerable. And I think the combination of this kind of search now for a moral high ground, this, will help to elevate and push this story back onto the front pages. And I do commend the Turkish government's insistence that it be a trial that is forensic, that's thought through properly, because it's only that way that the real truth, I hope, will emerge. And I think the truth, whatever comes out, will continue to damage Mohammed bin Salman at a time really when he needs to deliver on this huge remake of the Saudi economy, Vision 2030, which is now stalling out. He's continuing to spend huge amounts of money.
I think we've got, forgive me, Bill, we've got 60 seconds left. I want to give that, because you raised a really interesting point. Ismail, to what extent, in 60 seconds, do you think that Ankara is calculating there might be a chance for international traction if there's a change in upcoming US elections on this issue?
I mean, this is, of course, from Turkey's point of view, it's not related with the elections in the United States. I mean, the process, the legal process, proceedings will continue in Turkey, and if it is concluded with the murder conviction, then probably it will be taken to international level. Turkey, at least Turkey, will, for its part, will try to do this, and this is how the search for justice could be have to be made.
All right, we'll end it there. Let's thank our guests for a really interesting discussion. We've had Bill Law, Ismail Numan Telci, and Mehmet Celik. Thank you all for joining us on that one. And thank you for watching. You can see the show again, of course, anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle there is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here, for now, it's goodbye.